Good morning, all. Happy Saturday. Thank you for joining us on your weekend. But it's going to be 2 fantastic hours, as you should know from yesterday. So without further ado, I'm going to turn us over to our facilitator, Unathi. And I know today will be as awesome as yesterday. And I really encourage you to be as interactive as you were yesterday, because that really made it a very valuable session. So please feel free to interact, and just remember, so we can have some order, that you raise your hands, and I will try to maintain the flow of things. So thank you. Over to you, Nathi.
Hello everybody. Well, it's good morning to you. It's good afternoon this side of the world. I hope everybody's well. I wanted to just check with you, please, Erica. I'm not sure if the people that are on today are the same people. Everybody was here yesterday. Would you like me to just recap on what we spoke about yesterday, or should I just dive into today?
I think these are the same people as yesterday, but I see nothing wrong with a recap and reiterating what was discussed yesterday. I'll share the slide just now. One moment.
And perhaps, there's people that hadn't thought, hadn't chewed on the content well enough while it was happening to think of questions to ask, that maybe they would like an opportunity to get some clarity on some of the things we spoke about yesterday. I think we could start with that.
Exactly. So give me 1 second.
No problem.
So here we go. Here's yesterday's. So you can do your recap with Unathi. Unathi?
Yes, are you ready?
Yes, yes. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's that I wasn't on your screen, but it's fine because I have my. Oh, there you go. So basically, I think the key thing to um to just think about, if you remember anything about the two sessions, is that contracts are not scary; they are safety for everybody. And a contract is an agreement between two people or two or more people, and you have the right to negotiate the contract. So the things that we discussed yesterday, the key contract clauses were: who are the parties involved, artist, promoter, events person. We discussed the performance details and the venue. We discussed payment terms. We discussed riders briefly. We're going to go into more detail on that today. Actually, the focus is on those. We discussed travel accommodation, performance risks, immigration, which fell under that section. We also spoke about merchandising, promotion, and footage rights. And then I will also remember, I know there's a note that there's something around live streaming that I should discuss. There was a question from your side. Please remind me before we end the session to address that question.
Okay.
And we also spoke about termination and dispute resolution. And then the last thing we did was discussing a case study of Scott Mapuma being arrested in Mozambique because he did not pitch for a show. And then we unpacked and discussed what happens when performance terms aren't honored. People gave very interesting input. We discussed who is responsible for cross-border travel issues, and we explored how one can navigate around those things. I think that sums up what we spoke about yesterday. I don't know if there's any questions from yesterday that people had wanted to discuss. If not, then we can move on to today.
Any questions? Okay, you can continue.
Okay, so today's session is going to be a bit more practical, relaxed. I think yesterday it was a bit kind of academic, legal, formal terms. So what we're going to discuss today is, the first thing is hospitality, because it might seem like a very trivial issue in the bigger scheme of what happens during a live performance, but a lot of things go wrong with artists and promoters. There's a lot of conflict around hospitality. It's an important thing to look at. So, what is a hospitality rider? Do you want water? Do you want whiskey? Where's the line? These are the things we're going to discuss. Venue limitations, what's reasonable? Promoter obligations versus what the artist demands. So the way it works, right, is that if I were to explain a hospitality rider in a very simple manner, it's the section of the performance agreement or the contract that outlines what the artist needs for comfort and well-being before, during, and after the show. So it's not about, you being in the green room before performances, because you are sometimes required to stay after the show to take pictures and just hang out, depending on what your contractual obligation with the promoter is. So the hospitality rider must cover all those times that you're going to be there. What happens before the show, what happens during the show, what happens after the show. And then what does this rider cover typically? Obviously, it will vary from person to person. The more established artists that, consider themselves huge stars, travel with big entourages, their rider will be different from Unathi, who's just starting out. So it typically covers food and beverage. What are your requirements? Do you want halal meals? Do you want kosher meals? Do you want vegetarian? You must be very specific about the kind of things that you would like to have within reason. Dressing room requirements. It is actually not diva behavior to expect to have a dressing room, because when you come into a show, you are wearing, your normal clothes. You've got an outfit that you put on for the show. There's things that you want to do to relax before the show. There's a lot of things. You're entitled to privacy and comfort if you are performing. So please be very specific what you would require in the dressing room. And then accommodation and transport is also part of hospitality. I think we spoke about it yesterday as a generic thing in the contract clauses, but you must put more details about it in the actual hospitality rider. So when you send out your contract to the promoter, there's the generic contract that has all the clauses that we spoke about yesterday, and then you must send the hospitality rider as a separate document, because there's a lot of things that go in there. And also you'll find that the person that deals with the general contract is like a higher executive in the promoter's organogram, and maybe the person that deals with hospitality could be a contractor or somebody who is separate from the person that deals with the main contract, which is why you must have those documents separate. And also in the event of a dispute, then you can have a document in writing that says, this was the rider, this is what was delivered, this was what was not delivered. And then the fourth item is security and privacy. Security is very important because, I don't know how it is in Barbados, but here in South Africa, in some genres of music, there can be some conflict, among artists, among fans, things that can put the actual performer at risk. So you always have to make sure that, your security is handled by the promoter, and be very specific in terms of what kind of security you are looking for. For example, I'll give you a practical example with some of the artists I manage. There's always drama on backstage, just, in the corner there before one gets on stage. You find that the promoter has all his friends and buddies just like loitering. Nobody knows what they're doing. And, you've got a right as an artist, and I've seen international artists do this, to say, 10 minutes before my performance, I'd like the stage to be clear. There must be nobody there except the technical team and my team. It's not diva behavior. You've got the right to do that, because what I noticed is that it becomes very distractive, and other people need to kind of zone in before they perform, and then you have all these people just loitering. You don't know why they're there. So you have the right to put that clause in your rider that you'd like the stage to be cleared before you perform, and you say how many minutes before, bearing in mind that there's going to be somebody who's performing before you. But obviously there's that change over time where the MC fills in the gap so that they can fix the equipment and whatever else. During that period, you've got the right to say the only people that you'd like to have on stage are the technical people who are actually working there. And I've done it and it works. And it makes a difference sometimes to how the energy of the performer. And then the last item under this section is access control, which is, I think I touched on it a little bit when I mentioned clearing the stage. Now, access control means guest list or entourage. This is where sometimes I think artists are the ones who take advantage of the promoter in this regard. I have seen it, especially if you're performing in smaller venues like clubs, for example, with DJs, because I manage a DJ as well. That's now when the venue asks you for your hospitality rider, for me personally, they are always shocked that it's just the two of us. There's nobody else. Because people come with like 10 people who nobody knows why they're there. And then also in terms of, the beverages that you like, then they'll clean out the bar. They want 10 Hennessy's, they want this, they want that, which is a bit unfair on the promoter. So you have to, be cognizant of the fact that the promoter is also running a business, or the venue owner. And also you can't just bring people that don't add any value there. They're just there. It's I think it's irresponsible. But yeah, it varies from person to person. It's a personal decision. So, for example, what we'd put in the hospitality rider, artist A requires 2 bottles of still water, 1 fruit platter, 6 sandwiches, 2 towels, a private dressing room with a seating of 5 people. So you have to be very specific about those kind of things so that the promoter or the venue owner can prepare. And then the third thing to discuss is what are the obligations of the promoter versus, I think it's the next slide, versus, the demands of the artist. Do I want water? Do I want whiskey? I think it's the one, it might be before that. Sorry, it's number 10. Yeah, it's still here, sorry. This question kind of highlights how far is too far when it comes to rider requests. What's reasonable, what's unreasonable. And I think it'd be nice for us to have a bit of a discussion around this. For example, I'm just putting in my own example. What I would consider reasonable is bottled water, fruit, meals, basic meals for you, lunch or whatever, towels, basic alcohol, 1 or 2 bottles if you drink. What's excessive is demands for expensive liquor, rare imported snacks, extravagant items like scented candles and personal chefs. It might work with artists who are on that level. But yeah, I don't know if I can pause and we can discuss what's reasonable and what's not.
Okay. So to the audience, any comments? Any experiences you have that you want to share? Is what Unathi sharing common or traditional practice in your territory?
Sounds familiar. I've seen writers down to brand of peanuts that artists would like to have before the show. So I could relate what is being said to what I've seen before.
Well, that's something I would want to take up. Is it reasonable even down to the brand of the product? Is that a reasonable request? But before I have Unathi respond, Don Trent also has his hand raised. So go ahead, Don.
No, I just wanted to say, morning, everyone. I just wanted to say that it's really a personality thing with artists. I mean, my sojourns and partaking in shows and being on shows with international artists. Sometimes they ask for some very unique things, and I think sometimes it's the art themselves going through a type of power trip sometimes. But if you want the artist there, I think in some cases where they can afford to have these things, they are always willing to provide the artist needs. But it's a personality thing in most cases. And some artists just do it as a part of their star status, I would assume.
All right, Unathi, do you have thank you, Donna and O'Neill. Do you have a response to this? Is it reasonable to ask for Johnny Walker black versus Johnny Walker red?
I mean, I like what he said. It's a personality thing, and it also, I think, is dependent on on the promoter and their available budget. So when you book certain artists, I think as a promoter you have an idea of the kinds of hospitality expectations they have, and you prepare for it. But I think what we should take away from this discussion is that a rider should enhance the performance. It's not a wish list of luxury. This is from your side as a musician. It's a comfort guide. It's not a privilege list. People shouldn't use it to, get things that they've always wanted to get that they can't afford.
Oh,
That's my takeaway.
okay. Well, if there are any other comments, please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, you can continue, Unathi.
All righty then. And then the other thing is just, I think the key thing in all of this to avoid conflict is a balance in terms of what you request and what can be offered, and clear communication about it. And you must also be willing to compromise a bit, because sometimes it's a supply thing. You might want Scottish whiskey that is not available in that particular country, and then you must have a second option that, okay, if I don't get a bottle of Talisker, can I please have Glen Moringa or whatever, some other Scottish whiskey? And then what are the promoter's obligations? The promoter should meet reasonable requests agreed upon in the contract. And secondly, it is to ensure that the artist is comfortable so that the show can proceed smoothly. As I said before, it's not about a privilege list, it's about comfort, so that everybody enjoys the process. And the promoter is also obligated to provide basic hospitality for the crew if it is agreed in the contract. Because sometimes you find that the artist, as part of his entourage, maybe he's filming a documentary, he's got people there, or as part of his management team, there's a photographer, there's a manager. It is reasonable to expect that those people are also fed. Obviously, they don't have a specific rider list. It's just basic hospitality. And then artist demands. Artists may over request, which happens quite often. The promoters in this group will know this, or they'll copy big stars riders. When you get an opportunity where they say, okay, tell us what you'd like, and then you're like, yo, this is a chance for me to write whatever Beyonce writes on her rider. So over requesting is also not courteous behavior. And then the other thing is that if demands are not in writing, promoters are not obliged. So it's important, I think we spoke about it yesterday as well with the contract, that anything that is not in writing does not exist. So if there's now conflict at the end that, no, I'm not going to perform because I didn't get, my 30 thread count Egyptian cotton, you don't have a legal standing because it is not in writing. And then artists, because we're also dealing with human beings, we have to be reasonable. You must understand budget and venue limitations when you are thinking of your rider for the event. And then how do you keep things fair in this hospitality rider negotiation? Firstly, negotiate riders upfront. Before anything, while you're negotiating the booking, that's when you negotiate the riders and put them in writing, so that if there's issues, you can iron them out, and not the day before when the things aren't available. Secondly, specify brands or items if it's important. And then be flexible, which is something I just spoke about now regarding liquor for those who drink. Use realistic expectations based on the show scale. So if you're performing at a small club, that's going to have like 100 people, you can't, have a rider list that you would give to a promoter of a big festival. That doesn't make sense. And then if you are in doubt, add a hospitality budget clause in the contract to say, for hospitality budget, please allow A, B, C, and then break down the things. For example, I'll give you an example of what you can use for the hospitality budget clause. The promoter agrees to allocate 1,500 rands towards fulfilling the artist's hospitality rider. So that can happen if maybe you are not at a place where you can think of specific things, but you know that there's going to be some things you need. Then you can just ask them to allocate money for those things. which your team then can get for themselves. I don't know if no, that is clear.
Thanks. I actually have a question regarding the issue of the entourage. What I have seen here is the artists, those coming in from overseas, around the region in particular, regional artists travel with very large entourages. People who are just, to my friends, and higher on. And when I went through the budgeting for a show with a promoter, they explained that not only are they expected to pay for this entourage to come, they also expected to cover transport, per diems, etc. So that's with foreign, usually regional artists. Locally, what I've heard promoters comment on is that the local artists also want to come with a large entourage and have the expectation that, they will all be given, because in Barbados, I don't know in South Africa, but in Barbados, a lot of shows have a VIP section and a general section. And the artists will come with a large entourage with the expectation that they'll be given VIP access. So I wanted to know what you think of that. Is that normal practice? Is that just people taking advantage? How do you see that situation?
I think over and above everything else, it's just people taking advantage. So that's why it's very important for artist management teams to be very reasonable. And also the promoters, as much as I really want to book this particular artist, you have a right to put your kind of expectations on paper that besides the musician and their core team, and you name them, you're not willing to service any extra people. They have to pay or whatever. You have to put it in writing as the promoter, because people do take advantage. Some things are very unreasonable. You can't come with 20 people. What are they doing? And what I noticed that promoters do, which helps in sifting, the extra people, you have to specify what the role of the people that you are putting on there. So Unathi, Memela, artist manager, so-and-so, sound engineer, so that it can be clear whether the people are needed or not. So I think that's one way for the promoter to protect themselves. But artists just need to be reasonable.
Thank you. I see Philip has his hand raised. Go
Yes,
ahead,
please.
Philip.
Yes. Good morning again. This may be a bit of a far-reaching question, but I was curious to know, for those artists who are like very, very well known, do the artists ask the promoters for an event map or layout for their security? Because I know that there's some securities who would require like a layout of the venue, nearest exits and so on, just to be aware for their safety. Is that something that you request from the promoter as well?
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a little bit, but I think I got the gist of the matter. Yeah, because I don't know if it's my network, but I lost quite a bit of the question. But I know it had to do with security and the artists coming in with their own security, wanting to see the stage plan where the exits and things
Yes,
are. Is that
that's
what you're
correct.
saying?
Yeah.
And then you're asking whose responsibility it is.
Yes. If the artist
Um,
would request that from the promoter,
Okay. Yes, I think it's a fair thing. Actually, it's a very important thing that we could actually add to the clause, especially even if you're not a big international artist. It's a safety thing that makes sense because things happen at live shows. If there's an emergency, where's the quickest way to get out? And also, a lot of the international artists, they do dry runs, so they come to the venue, they actually run through the whole thing, so that if in the unfortunate event that something happens, there's a way then of they know exactly what to do. There's no panic. And I think the responsibility lies on both ends because it protects everybody. It protects the artist. It also protects the promoter. And when it comes to now insurance claims, you are able to say these are the risk management things that we did to to prepare for this situation, and it makes it easy then for your claim to be processed.
Okay,
I don't know if
thanks.
that answers it.
Yes, indeed.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so we can continue.
All righty, then we can move on to, I think the next step then would be, we've done the rider. We need to get to what is a technical rider, because there's two kinds of riders. There's the comfort hospitality rider, and then there's a technical rider. So basically, a technical rider is a document, and the word document is important because remember, we put everything in writing. If it's not in writing, it does not exist. So it's a document that outlines what the technical and stage requirements a performer is going to need for a successful show. And it's very, very important here to be specific, because what happens is now, if something is missing in the technical rider, it's going to affect the output, which is your performance. And the people who have bought tickets for the show don't know about the background stuff. They're just going to say you had a whack show. You're not as good a performer as they thought you were. And sometimes it's something as simple as the wrong kind of microphone. So you have to be very specific, in terms of what your needs are. So it's also part of the overall performance agreement. And it's used by, the people who the technical rider is given to is the sound engineer, the stage manager, the lighting crew, and the venue operators to prepare for the event. So that nobody can say, oh, sorry, I didn't know that we needed to plug this there. Everybody is aware of what their part in the technical rider is, which is also why it is important to do sound check, because that's where you can determine if there's any issues and they can be solved before the show starts. It tells the venue what equipment is needed, how the stage should be set up, and what the artist or band expects for sound and lighting. Mostly, it's the artist sound engineer will communicate directly with the sound providers at the event. So it's important, even if you're a small artist, to have a sound person on your own team, who's going to make sure that, your needs are met. Because what I've noticed is that in events, for example, a festival, there's like 10 artists on the lineup. The engineers are very lazy sometimes, or they just get irritated. Like they're dealing with this one, then this one is yelling at that one. But if you've got your own sound person, then, it makes the main engineers work easier, because they'll assist there. They know how you want your things done. So, they will be there on hand. So that's why it's important to have your own sound person and to sound check, to take out all the kinks before the show. So what does this technical rider typically include? It depends on the artist, depends on the genres. Other people are DJs, other people are live performers with like an orchestra, other people are doing a cappella. So it would vary, obviously, depending on what kind of artist you are. But basically, sound is how many microphones, DI boxes, monitors, in-ear systems, sound check times. That's the sound element of the technical rider. So you have to be specific. If there's a band of 5 people and there's one vocalist and maybe one of the guitarists is also a vocalist, you have to think of all those things, that you need 2 microphones, 2 vocal microphones, you'll need microphones for instruments. You have to be very, very specific. And then the other thing that's very important that people don't look at is the stage plan. Ideally, your technical rider must have a stage plan, because the people that have booked you don't know how your setup is, who stands where and why. You are the one who knows with your band where you place people and the reason. So have it in almost like a technical drawing. It must be written with little squares that microphone 1 here, vocal microphone 2, vocal microphone 3, bass, lead, drum. Place them in a diagram, so that the person who's the stage designer knows exactly how to set up the equipment. So the stage plan, just to recap, is the layout of instruments and performers on stage, drums, keys, backing singers, DJ, where everybody's going to be. That's your responsibility as the artist to tell the promoter, to give the promoter a stage plan. And then lighting, if that is specific to you, if you have effects, you have mood settings. Other people have something that plays on the screens at the back with their faces on. You have to submit all those things to the people that design the lighting for the event. And then the other important thing is the backline. What do you need from the venue? It has to be specific what you're bringing and what the venue or the promoter provides. Generally, the backline is provided by the promoter. Drum kit, amps, keyboard stands. And then because instruments are very personal, obviously, people bring their own instruments 100% of the time. But you need to know what's available in the back line so that if there's something that's not there that you'll need, that you can perhaps then bring yourself. Power supply, always a place where people are fighting. I've seen serious arguments backstage based on there isn't enough voltage for this kind of thing. Hey, if you plug this there, the whole thing's gonna blow up. You're going to destroy my stage. So it's important to understand what the power supply capabilities are of the venue. And then the second last thing on this, excuse me, this issue is the schedule. You need to say what loading time are you going to be there by, sound check time, performance time, with specifics that we need, as our band, we need 30 minutes to load in our things. Our sound check is this long, our performance is this long. And that helps the promoter to plan because you're not the only person performing there. So that then they know how to schedule all of those things. And then the last thing is emergency procedures, because these things happen. What happens if there's a technical failure? It's known to happen, but if you have a plan ahead for it, it needs to be in writing that, in the case of this failing, this will happen. This is what we'll do to mitigate. So I think I'll stop there and allow some questions.
Any questions? I must say personally, I have always thought in terms of the hospitality rider. I mean, I'm not an artist or artist manager. I don't really need to think about these things, but I must say I just learned so much as regards the concept of the technical writer. So that was very useful for me. Any comments or questions for the artists in the room? Are you familiar with this? Does this happen when you're performing? Do you get these or do you provide these types of writers? All right.
I've actually hospitality radar is not totally new, but a little refresher for myself. I've seen technical raters, but then I was like with yesterday's session, the question was posed, I think it was from Andre, it would have been somebody in relation to what I think I had answered it or put an input, what determines, an artist being called up by a promoter. I think it was along the line of who advertises or whatever the case may be, and they responded with the notion of how big the artist is, catalog and that kind of stuff. From being around on some stages here, I think that same thing kind of lines to this particular situation because I've been in situations where writers would have said certain things and then you get there and because it's a smaller group, not that popular, some things are missing. Some checks never go, ever go the way they are supposed to. But for the level of music, the show goes on. So I guess that's where that delicate balance is between promoter and musician or promoter and band or organizer. That's just what I would say about that particular one.
Thank you. And James has his hand. James
Hey,
and then
thanks.
Romance here.
From my experience, from both being on the stage and from being a promoter in the position of a promoter and a stage manager and helping people with projects, there is almost a direct correlation between the level of the artist and the tech rider that they expect. So if you're dealing with a guy who's not known in your community and has never really been heard and isn't really drawing an audience, the tech riders tend to be lower. When if you're dealing with a superstar, the tech riders can sometimes be obnoxious and actually quite insane. It's a bit of a gamble that a lot of artists play to get the correct balance, but in the end, the worst thing that can happen at a gig is that while you're backstage, the artist is having a massive argument with the people over a bottle of whiskey, it means that the producers, promoters, and the artists possibly don't ever want to work together again. So it's very good just to have a healthy relationship about this, rather than sort of sending them on a piece of paper and expecting them to provide everything. Have a discussion with them if you can.
Thank you, James. Romancia?
Yes, a pleasant good morning to everyone. Good to be here again. Sorry for the late start on my part. But I want to say that last night at my rehearsal, one of my rehearsals, I, for the first time, said something to the sound engineer. Reference the sound, how my mic was sounding to me and what I actually wanted to hear from the mic. And it was not as bad as I thought it would have been in terms of his response. Actually, he was thankful that I came to him personally and said something. And I actually got what I wanted, and everyone was happy thanks to our conversations yesterday. I decided to exercise what I learned in a very professional manner, and it was good. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
That's awesome, Romancia. But what startles me a bit is that it came across as though prior to the discussion yesterday, you didn't actually feel confident enough to say what you want. Am I interpreting you correctly?
Yes, yes. I knew what I wanted, but sometimes you don't want to rock the boat with people because you watch how I'm one that usually sits and watch, and then when you see how people interact with certain people, then, you say, look, I don't want to go through that because it might interfere with my mindset and the way I perform. So, let me stay in my little happy place and just get it over with. But it's beginning to change. I'm seeing things a bit different and I'm operating at a different level, and I'm happy about that.
I'm happy to hear you speak so honestly and open about the issue. It's not for discussion here and now, but I can tell you, even when we were thinking about what topics do we want to cover in the webinar series, this was the first one. And why? Because my observation is that we need to really move towards establishing meaningful standards of practice in the industry. So giving artists and promoters, to the extent that they participate, the opportunity to learn about what is good practice, and then moving towards a situation where we can really up the standards of practice here. That would for me be the ideal outcome. So to hear your comment is actually very, very encouraging. And I'm going to turn back to Unathi, and I hope that the other participants will benefit as you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That kind of warmed my heart, your comments. And also, I think it speaks to artists sometimes feeling like they don't want to come across as divas when they're asking for things that are actually essential. So I'm glad you had the reawakening, that tells you that you do have, the right to request certain things. I'm happy about that. And then just the other thing that we can add then to the technical rider conversation is the personnel that is required on site. It is good to put that in writing. For example, these are just examples. Obviously, it would depend on what your offering is, how many people are in your band, and all of that, and what kind of music you do. But for example, 1 times sound technician, 1 times stage assistant, stage manager, 1 time lighting operator if you're using venue lights. So for whatever need you've got technically, we have to make sure that there's people that know how to handle those specific things. And then there's an example of a very simple technical writer for somebody who's doing, a semi-live show. Normally you put it into three columns. So for the first column, the heading will say input, the next column will say channel, the next column will say description. So input one is for the lead, the channel is lead vocal. Then you explain what you need there. One wireless or corded mic. And then, very important, I think I touched on this yesterday because I deal with a cappella bands as well. It's very important to specify the brand of microphone that you prefer. It's not diva behavior because microphones don't have the same standards. And I think most of the time I've seen people talking about show mics, and that you see a lot on riders. But be specific about the brand of microphone that you prefer. And the promoter has to be willing to accommodate it because it impacts, the output. Then an example would be input 2, channel, backing vocal, 1 corded mic with a boom stand, input 3, keyboard left, keyboard right, DI box or stereo. So you have to be very, very specific about the technical descriptions. Acoustic guitar, lead guitar, bass guitar. If you want a talkback microphone, you must put it down there for stage communication if it's needed, especially for big shows, because sometimes things happen while you're performing and you have to find a way of communicating with somebody who's very far to let them know that, hey, I can't hear this, or there's feedback on my monitor. So it's very important if you want to have a good show to ensure that these things are written in your rider. And then the thing that we spoke about is the stage plan as well. Be very specific. If you want the artist center stage, if you have a DJ as part of your act, you want the DJ on stage left. Why are technical writers important? Number one, they're important for artists because they ensure that the performance goes smoothly, reducing surprises. Nobody wants things to blow up in the middle of the performance because it affects the experience. Live shows are about the experience. I can buy a ticket, enjoy the show, and then one small technical thing happens and it ruins my whole experience. So the idea of technical writers is to avoid such things. Secondly, it's important for promoters. It helps them to budget and to prepare for the venue properly because, they need to get all these things. And all of those things have got monetary implications. It's important, lastly, for the crew. It saves time and it avoids confusion on event day. So if all of these things are clear, everybody's gone through sound check, on the day, things just run smoothly because, everybody has prepared and they know what's required of them. Obviously, it's not always going to be 100%, but then you're just mitigating small issues that will arise. Now, what happens if there's no technical rider? Delays, equipment failure, poor sound quality, and all of those things affect the audience experience and your reputation as a musician. Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to talk about the promoter per se. It's your show. You were announced as the headliner. So anything that's negative that is linked to the show always goes back to the artist. So you need to make sure that you're protected in that way. I don't know if there's any questions about the stage plan.
O'Neill, have you been provided stage plans in the past? Is this standard practice in your experience?
I have had to provide a stage plan recently as last year. Actually, I got to provide another one just now. But as a performer, no. It usually is, you turn up, you find a space. A lot of, as I was saying, with the bigger and more known artists, as the host was saying, it seems to be a lot more streamlined. But that's one of the reasons why I'm here to learn a little more and understand how things are supposed to really be. But I've submitted a stage plan, even if not a physical drawing document. I've gone through a stage plan with a sound engineer on stage already.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? I'm not only picking on O'Neill, but any other comments from anyone? All right.
Very good.
All right, go ahead.
Just wanted to say, whenever I listen to any any dispensation of knowledge or any new thing, I always think of when you transpose ideas and things, how relevant it is to the context of where you exist. And coming from the level at which I would say myself, where I have performed, when you ask for some of these things, like the sister said earlier, some people might take offense to it. I remember performing and asking about the mic, for example, and because I had heard this before from other artists about how important it was to ensure your mic was, the quality of mic that would give your voice the best production. And the promoter took great offense. And so for me, it's always contact and how do you manage these things and the respect that the promoter has for the artist and even for the music itself and how the production songs on the night of the event. So I'm just thinking context and how much it may be applicable or not applicable simply because of, as you said, there are no standards existing currently and how offensive this may come off to someone else. You know what I mean?
Sorry, I don't want take us on a tangent, but I think it's relevant. I have a problem with some of your comments in the sense of like being seen as offensive and the relevance in our context because it's just not practice. I would argue that standards are standards, and the fact that they're not applied in large measure, from what I understand, at least with local and regional artists, with the big international artists coming into the region, I'm sure it has to be different. But it's because honestly, there's a lack of knowledge, whether it's on the part of the artist, their management, or the promoter. And because whoever is allowed to get away with it. We don't have a lot of people in the session today, but at least some people will leave with improved knowledge of what really should happen. And it may be a long, hard battle, but I think the artists in particular and their managers really have to start taking a stand. How often do we hear about events that didn't live up to their potential because the sound was terrible? That happens so often. You hear how horrible the production was. And to be honest, shows in Barbados at least are not cheap to attend. So the audience, your fans, your customers are not getting what they're paying for. So I think we just, like I said, it might be a long, hard battle, but we really need to figure out how we're going to improve standards in the industry. And the first step is what we're doing today, which is to first have some knowledge. So, Don, I think these are just as applicable in our region for artists. Of course, there'll be some variation based on where the artist is in their career and so on. But I would argue, no, we need to start demanding better. So that's my response to your comment.
I think it's all come down to relationships and like respect for each other. Cause like from where we sit, you would get an artist that got one big song from overseas. Never heard. Come here in this region, in this context, and be treated like, And then sometimes we got artists that from the region or the country that have catalog been on it and still having issues. I think it's be a respect thing between networking, relationships, and respect for each other would help this process to be a lot more, what's the word, amicable or less stressful because we all understand that we all have a part to play and that every person has a unique positioned to have the entire thing pulled off, and the key is to have everybody comfortable. But then is I don't know, it's a funny mind state thing in relation to I can speak for Barbados and how we treat to others in the same industry that we're in.
All right, thanks, O'Neill. And let's hear Romancia, and then we can continue. So, Romancia?
Yes. Mr. Walcott, you are very correct. This is something that we need to deal with, and I think we also need a webinar for technicians. This is very important also. When I have to perform in Europe, when I arrive, I don't have to deal with half of what I have to deal with when I'm in Barbados, and this breaks my heart. But then, people tend to think it's a diva thing, and just not to do the right thing, they divert to that sentence, which is totally uncalled for. The aim is to have a beautiful production, transmit the wow effect to the audience, and everybody's happy. People get what they're paid for. You get the sound you want. You feel good. And when your sound is good, you perform better. You go to another place. Well, me personally, when my sound is right, I don't even want to stop performing. I just go. But you need to feel good. You need to feel good. This is music, right? So it could be a little disrespectful thing, but like I said, when I go to Europe, I don't have to ask for anything. They just listen to the tone of my voice and they give me this. They say, this is okay. You need a little more of this. You need a little more of that. Or you need less of something. And then down the road, we gone. But, we'll get there though. I'm positive.
Thank you so much. Unathi, you can proceed. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So now we're just going to get into kind of, a nice debate, pros and cons, comments, experiences on a couple of things. So I've broken it down into, a real world kind of comments and what would be the best practice for that particular issue. I think there's one, two, three issues. So we'll start with, I think we actually discussed this quite extensively yesterday when we were talking about marketing obligations. But I think if people still need, have more to say, we can chat about it. So the artist says, well, I'm here to perform. That's all I'm paid for. The promoter says, your presence promotes the event, we both benefit. We discussed this quite a bit yesterday. So what would be the best practice in this particular scenario? And I think we also spoke about this when we're saying, okay, there's two debates, two trains of thought. What is the middle ground? The middle ground then would be add a clause if promotion is expected. As an artist, you can charge a fee for additional promotion work, because as much as the promoter can say, we're both going to benefit. If you promote, more people, are going to come in. And I think somebody commented yesterday to say, also it's beneficial for your following. There were fair arguments on both sides. So if you're going to do it and you feel like you should be paid extra for it, then put a clause that says so. Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, Instagram post, interviews, media interviews, print, radio, online. Content creation, if you're expected to do a video that says, hello, everybody, my name is Unathi. Catch me at the so-and-so festival in Barbados on such and such a date. That's work. You have to sit and record this video. Do you want to be compensated for it? If so, it must be put in the contract. I don't know if anybody has got experience with this. Any thoughts?
I have thoughts. I'm not sure if they're the great ones, but I'll still voice them. Don't Trent, I hear you on the radio, it sounds good. That's how to say that. But you mentioned earlier,
Brother.
you mentioned, oh shoot, you've mentioned something, but it slipped me. Anyway, this is going to be along your line. Right, budget for marketing. Every promoter will have a budget for marketing. Yeah, you mentioned, Trent, about using knowledge you have to assimilate to a new situation to apply it for betterment, something along those lines. So here's my take on it.
Yeah.
When a chef cooks a piece of chicken, the chicken is the meal, the chicken is what people are paying for. The chicken is not asked to go and market itself because it's inanimate. It can't do that. So I look at it like that kind of situation. If the promoter has a budget for marketing, the artist in this case becomes that piece of chicken that is prepared and whatever. Everybody comes to see it, but partake. So as like the food store will have a budget for marketing to pay somebody to market this piece of chicken, I think that some kind of middle ground could be made between the artist and artist management and promoter. Let's say your budget is X. Well, okay, you already paid for the artist, so the fee was not inclusive of any promotion, so you take a third of X or a 16th of X and you give us for that extra promotion. Or the fix that would be to just put a promotional price in the artist's fee and the upfront negotiation stage. That's how my brain is seeing it. So as to, eliminate any blurred lines or to create any hate or animosity between the parties.
Sure, that's a fair contribution. I agree. I agree fully.
Any other comments? Oh, Christine has her hand raised. Go ahead, Christine. Christine? Okay, I don't know what's happening with Christine. So, continuing, and when she comes, we'll have her say what she has to say.
Yeah, our network is a bit dodgy this afternoon, actually, because I was also struggling. I was hoping everybody can hear me because the connection is very unstable. But I hear people in bits and pieces, but I've been able to kind of manage so far. So maybe she's having a similar issue.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, we are hearing you fine, no problem.
Yes, yeah. All right, then. Then we can perhaps move on to the other issue, which is a big sticking point, because music is a business, is the non-payment after performance. And I know that people are going to have stories to tell. Personally, when I'm done with this explanation, I'll tell a story that you will not believe. So the show happens, the payment now is delayed, or it just doesn't come. What happens? What is the best practice? And there's always excuses. I'm sure you guys also have like a history of many excuses of why the payment hasn't come through. Door takings were low. And personally, this is not the artist's risk to bear. When you put together a show as a promoter, whether you sell tickets or not, most times people are like, well, that's not my problem. I've performed. I've my obligation. What is expected of me, I delivered. So you can't use that as an excuse not to pay me that you didn't sell enough tickets. So I don't know. Before I open the floor to experiences and comments, I will give my own story of what happened last year. Because I manage a number of artists, I thought it was a fortunate thing at that point, which I regretted later. I had three of the artists that I managed were booked for this festival. One is a DJ, one is a traditional artist, and one is a hip hop artist. I thought, oh, wow, there comes commission, ting, ting, money, very excited. Helped the promoter with everything. We did videos that were saying, hey, we're going to be at ABC. And also because I do, I'm a publicist. So it comes in handy because then I can help you with, certain things just as an additional thing with PR for the event. So I went out, I was pushing, on Facebook, everywhere across social media, very excited about this thing. Now we got our 50% deposit as per contract, within the duration that we expected to get it. Everybody was happy. Come the balance now. So the agreement is that we'll get the balance during the week of the show. It could be anywhere, it could be the day before, anywhere, as long as it's before we actually perform. I'm waiting. The money is not coming into the account. I'm thinking, maybe it'll happen later. Then I start getting calls from, because the music industry is very small in most countries. Everybody knows each other. people are texting me, the other artist managers, hey, have you been paid the balance? Have you been paid the balance? Nobody's been paid. And I'm still very, I'm a kind of a positive person. I'm like, nah, there's no way this guy is not going to pay us. I mean, there's like, his lineup was a bit long, which I raised as a concern with some of my artists that, hey, all these people on the same day, and it's big artists. Let's see how this goes. Can I tell you that on the day of the event, I had to travel from Johannesburg to another province where the event was held. It's about an hour and a half because the man was not answering his phone. Nobody could get hold of him. I got there at the venue. There was nothing. There was nothing that says there's going to be a show. Nothing, not a thing. There's the stage, and that was it. There were no people. There was nothing. The man was nowhere to be found. Nobody could believe it. And everybody else that was booked that day, even the people that are not on my books, they had other gigs. So, you plan that, okay, if my performance time is this time, I'm going to need this much time to travel from A to B. So now people were calling because they didn't know whether they should just go to their next gigs or what should happen. To this day, I have never been able to find the man. The show never happened. We kept our deposits. We didn't get our balance. And then a few months later, the gentleman had the audacity to send me a WhatsApp message to say, can you please send me the artist ID numbers so I can do a report? Needless to say, I did not respond. So that is one of my many experiences with payment and promoters. Over to you, Madam.
All right. Well, I know this has been an issue, but I am not an artist or artist manager, so I'm curious to hear from the experience of the artists and managers in the room. One of the things I would also like to ask, read the contract. Is it normal or is it, in other types of contracts, you'll have an audit provision, the right to audit. Is this standard practice? Because what I know of a standard practice here is that you get a deposit of some form up front. And the night before anything starts, or before, as soon as the show is finished, there's a huddle and the money is paid. And that's as much as I know about practice here. But I want you to know if there's any possibility. I mean, there's a power dynamic there and so on. Nonetheless, is it possible to have an audit provision?
Hello.
Did you hear me?
There was, or there is a lawyer in this webinar.
Yeah, including Dawn, but I was actually
It sounds
Unathi. The attorneys can answer, but I wanted to hear from Unathi if in her experience there's if it's practice to have to the artist to require audit provision in the contract just in case.
You're breaking very, very badly, but I don't know. I will just answer what I think you were asking because I couldn't hear most of it because I don't know, something is quite wrong with that.
I'm sorry.
But no, it's okay. But my thing is, you see, I don't know how it is in other countries. Here in South Africa, as much as we've got everything on paper, contracts. At the end of the day, the promoters don't care, to be honest. Like, what are you going to do? And the litigation is just too much effort, time, and money. So nobody ever, we got our deposit. We weren't going to perform if we weren't paid the balance anyway. So there was no, it's not worth the chasing afterwards to say, okay, where's our balance? Yeah, the effort is just, it's not worth it because it just takes too much time and it's not worth even the amount of money that you are owed. So people, most times people just let it go.
Okay, thanks. So any of the attorneys or artist managers in the room have any comments?
Erica, I will speak in my dual capacity, but as an artist, yes, I've done shows where I'm still owed. but the period of limitation probably passed, so those debts are probably still. But with respect to non-payment after performance, the thing is the artist can always sue in the civil court because it's a contractual arrangement, whether it is written or oral, for recovery of debt, whether that is in the magistrate court, depending on quantum, or in the high court, if you have a high court or a Supreme Court, um, depending on if it goes over the whatever statutory threshold is set. But in most cases, as Unathi said, you just let it be. You just let it go because you know the artist might have seen the event and thought, oh, it didn't do that well, so let me not pressure the individual. But of course, you still have that right, and it's not the artist's risk to bear. I noticed working with the Jamaican artists and some soca artists as well who performed internationally that the deposit is paid before the artist arrives in the country and before the artist goes on the stage, the artist collects the remainder of their funds so that there isn't that issue at the end with respect to non-payment. In some instances, the artist may, depending on the friendship or relationship with the promoter, the artist may collect the money after. But again, it's relationship based. But there's no standard practice. But there is an attempt to standardize with respect to certain artists from certain countries. They operate in one way. I have never worked with or hired a Jamaican to do anything who did not collect their money before going on stage.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? And then there's a comment in the chat that I need to address. Any other comments? All right, so Christine had Unathi. She said she was struggling to unmute.
Okay.
So this is from before. She just wanted to add that there is value to in an artist just reposting on social media that they will be performing at ticketed events just to verify the authenticity of their performance there. In South Africa, it has happened all too often where the likeness of an artist is used to promote an event without genuine involvement of marketed artists. And I can say, for sure in Barbados, I've heard artists complained where their names are used in ads for events that they have no involvement in. It's just to promote the event. So that was Christine's comment that, the artist at least putting out a post confirming their participation helps to verify the authenticity of the event.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Christine.
So yesterday, the topic came up of provisions governing use of image and likeness, and it was said that it is not something done in the region. I could be wrong, but somebody could shed a little light on that.
No, it's just that we don't have specific legislation governing image rights or rights and personality. So a lot of times you hear people talking about image rights, but under our legal system, we don't have you wouldn't go and see a law on image rights per se. So that was the point being made. There are ways to benefit to some extent from protection of your image, but there's no specific legislation on it.
One
You'd
quick
have to do it.
question.
You'd have to do it. Sorry, just to add to Erica's statement, you'd have to do it through copyright, which, as she said, to a lesser extent, or through the tort of passing off. These things fall within, not to get too legal, but what we would call common law as opposed to statute law.
All right, if we do, I'm not too lost because it was about to ask a question. The question would have been, can an artist trademark their image, as in their face, use that and go that angle. This is a little technical, but
It would be a specific rendering of your image, right?
okay.
There are ways, and you could trademark your name, your autograph. There are certain strategies you can use to where you can have a trademark for sound, possibly your voice. But yeah, it's a strategy that you have to really discuss, and a piecemeal kind of strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions? Let's see who's here. Let's keep him very quiet. Um, eh, okay. All right. Well, let's continue, Unathi, and hopefully have further interactions.
Sure. And then the other thing that we can look at, and I think we've touched on it, whether it's through what I said or through some of the responses and experiences, unfair practices, exposing and preventing abuse. Because I think a lot of the times artists, if something terrible has happened to them, like what happened with me and this promoter, and it wasn't the first time, by the way, people don't take them to task. We're just like, oh, he's a dodgy man, we'll never work with him, and then that's it. But I think it's important at times as an artist to have a list of people that should be blacklisted because they don't deliver on obligations, and so that other people are aware, that they don't fall into the same trap. Non-payment after performance, venue owners undercutting agreed fees. This happens a lot, I think, with clubs as well. If you're a DJ, you'll agree, sign the contract and everything, and then post-show, the person says, "Oh well, sorry, I only made this much. Take it or leave it." It's because they know that legally, I mean, you could sue them. It's not worth it, so nothing's going to happen. So the chain of kind of dodgy behavior and abuse continues. Contracts are there to protect artists, but people aren't always respecting their contractual obligations. And then there's a question that you had sent in, an issue that you had asked that I address. So I'd like to do that before we get into the case study. It was to address the issue of what should be addressed contractually where the promoter wants to live stream and or record for later broadcast the artist's performance. How should the artist be compensated? What rights does the artist have in terms of creative control to first approve the content to make sure that it is of an appropriate quality or standard? That was the question, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then, it's an interesting one because we are in the digital age where live streaming is a form of broadcast, and it's fair for events people to want that to happen. So then my response would be, number one, this is from a legal perspective in South Africa, in the way entertainment law works here. So it might be different in other countries. So the artist actually doesn't own the rights of the song they are performing, in the sense that the song belongs to the songwriter, because the artist sometimes is not always the songwriter, the person performing. So the song actually belongs to the songwriter, the publisher, and the record label. Whoever owns the master copy is the person who owns the rights to the song. So the permission must go to them, even if the artist is independent or they did this on their own. So the person that has to give the promoter permission for this live stream is whoever has the master rights to the song in South Africa. I don't know how it works in other countries. And then the written permission must also be very specific about who's streaming or shooting the video and who's going to own the footage. So it's a bit, it's complex. I think it's something that if you want to do it, because there's money involved, somebody's going to benefit commercially from this. You need to sit down with a lawyer and draft the contract properly. And then in terms of charging, the promoter then has to communicate where they're going to be streaming this thing to, where they're going to be playing the footage. And then the discussion of charging will come from where the footage or stream is going. Is it free? Is it for the public? Or is it for a subscriber, like a subscription platform? Those need to be considered because that will determine how much the artist charges for live streaming. That is the response. I'm open to other people's opinions on the matter.
Wouldn't I guess Erica or somebody from Costco would answer this. Would a recorded performance simulate or go as a record would? So say, let's say I played trombone or bass on a particular track on stage, it is recorded and played at a later date or later dates. Would it not be similar to if I had performed on a recorded track in the studio that then hits radio waves and the subsequent and allotted royalties should be paid to the performer on the track? Is that how a visual audio recording works, or is it just reserved for straight studio recordings, radio, YouTube, and that kind of stuff?
All right, let me explain how it works here. So if you want to record, let's say stream a performance on show. To the extent that COSCA as a collective management organization manages the rights in the underlying musical works in the songs that the artists are performing, we will issue a license for the streaming of the performances of those musical works. To the extent that we're talking only about live performances and say there's no DJ, no recorded music, you're right in that then there's no master rights owner to consider. It's really the performers, their live performance. Now, how the performers are treated will depend on the contract with the promoter. Because if the promoter sets it up so they're treated as the executive producer of the event and so on, the contract may be that the promoter acts like a master rights owner would, i.e. the stream and the then account to the performers directly based on the revenue generated. They're paid a royalty of some sort. If it's a case the event is going to be recorded for later broadcast, same thing. First of all, we need to know the musical works recorded, and to the extent that they're managed by COSCAP, we will issue a license to allow for the recording of the performance of the musical works. And the promoter of the show and the contract with the performer, again, it's similar to what you would have with recording in a studio or whatever. So the promoter will, in the contract, be treated just as the exec producer would be, and again have an agreement with the performers on how they will be paid based on revenue or what have you. That's how we do it in practice here. But the other thing that also happens, and I think Unathi was referring to this, is that the artists, even though they don't own the rights in the musical works being performed, and when I say even though they don't own the rights, because to the extent that the artist is also a songwriter, but a member of a copyright organization, they may have transferred depending on how the type of mandate given to the organization. They would have in effect, transfer their rights to the copyright organization as songwriters, and therefore they don't have the right to give authorization to the promoter. So what often happens, and this could be for a show that's being recorded or being streamed, it also happens with ads or use of music in films and other types of uses. People will go to the artist, and the artist assumes, for whatever reason, that they own the rights and have authority to give permission. So often you will go to the promoter event and say, look, you can't just stream the event without the appropriate licenses or what have you, and the promoter will tell you, but the artist gave me permission. But in practice, the promoter should seek an agreement, a license from the relevant copyright organization. And to the extent that they're only recording or streaming live performances, have arrangements, agreements in place with the artists. If they're also going to be using recordings, like a DJ playing, and they're going to stream that, or the or record for later broadcasts, it can get very complicated because they need to ensure they have the clearances from the owners of the rights in the recordings as well. Thank you.
Okay. It's going to get complicated, but I have one last question and I can keep quiet. Now, permit me to complicate it a little more. The recording is of a song, well registered. Let's call it a classic, something from Gabby or the Merry Men, or a known artist who has everything that they should have in place with cost cap in this particular instance. However, on the stage, none of the original artists, musicians are the performers of this particular track. Yes, the original singers and performers are credited. How now does the trickling down of fees or any royalties, if to be had by the performers of this track, sorted? How is that done? Because technically it will be a cover, rights will be given ownership to the original singers, but then the performer himself on stage, who is recorded and then broadcasted at later dates and times in the future. How does something like that pan
Right.
out?
So it's not that complicated. If an artist is recorded performing, or if their performance is streamed, and it's someone, they are not the owner of the rights, the copyright, and the musical work being performed, and the song being performed. A license is obtained, say, from COSCAP or the relevant entity. COSCAP will pay the authors of the original work. So in your example, you used some Barbadian songwriters, Gabby, for example. So Gabby would be paid as the author of the work. The artist is paid for their performance of the work. And as I mentioned, it would be, no, it depends. If the artists agree, because COSCAP manages some rights of performers, and if there's agreement, COSCAP will issue a license on behalf of the performers that will stipulate what the producer of the event has to pay and how they have to pay to account to the performers. And we do that particularly with for example, with the National Cultural Foundation, when they do pay-per-view events and so on. To the extent that we represent the artists, they get a license directly from us, which will protect or look after the interests of the artists and ensure they're being paid. Outside of that type of scenario where you can get an agreement from the copyright organization or the organization representing performers, the producer would have an agreement with the performers, with the artists, that stipulates how they will be paid and should account to them directly. And just to be clear, you have, when I speak of artists or performers, you have to know if the performers, legally speaking, includes, for example, dancers, musicians, singers, etc. So to the extent that performers are featured in the stream or the recording, they would have to all be accounted for. But O'Neill, I don't mind answering, or for you or anyone else, more questions on this. But I don't really want to take up too much of Unathi's time because I know she wants to go through a case study. But I am happy to have the conversation with anyone who wants to delve into this more deeply. All right. But someone else had their hand raised. I can't remember who it was. I think it may have been Ronnie. Ronnie, did you have a question? So O'Neill, we can always talk more, but Ronnie, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorted. I'm just digesting everything that you said. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Any other questions or comments before I turn back to Unathi?
Okay. So I think what I'll do, just in the interest of time, because I do want us to spend just a little time just chatting about the case study, is to just then summarize, the key points from everything from yesterday and today. That would be, I think, slide 13. So what do we take away from our discussion over the 2 sessions? The key points that need to come out of contracts. Number 1, clear payment terms, specify performance fee, deposit, balance, payment, and the deadline of payment for the balance. And then if there's going to be late payment, what are the penalties? That should be there. Cancellation clause, protect yourself from last minute cancellations and define what the refund and compensation procedures are, because these things do happen. The promoter decides that, just for forecasting that he or she is not gonna make the ticket sales, the event has to be cancelled. So protect yourself by having those procedures of what should happen then in that case. Dispute resolution. I think we had this discussion yesterday, even now actually, about how the legal process, if you're to now go and sue somebody for breach of contract, is just long-winded and unnecessary. So the other options would be mediation, some sort of legal resolution that does not involve going to court if some of the terms are violated. Technical and performance conditions, ensure that all the performance requirements are guaranteed from both sides. What's on the rider and what the promoter expects, everybody meets their obligations. So I think that's how I would then, summarize the key points. And then we go back to, if we go to number 14, this is the last slide before we get into the case study. If you remember anything about everything we've discussed today, these are the key points that I would like you to remember. Contracts are not scary. They are just to they're for safety so that everybody's protected. So, people shouldn't be afraid to delve into them, discuss and put in things that they expect or need in the contracts. Hospitality riders should be practical. They're not diva demands. Everyone benefits from a well-run, well-promoted show, as Christina, I think, had noted in the chat there. So it's not far-fetched for the promoter to request that, you help promote the show, because you are also going to benefit, if people come and attend. And it also works for me if you are performing in a new territory where you're trying to get a new audience. It's in your best interest to sell yourself as well through promoting the fact that you're going to perform there. And then be very clear. I think we discussed this when we were talking about the riders. Protect yourself with clarity and not conflict. And that would go back to, I think there's a gentleman that brought about the, sometimes the attitude, people get offended when you say certain things. And I think it's just in the communication style and the tone and how you present your expectations, because, we're human beings and there's egos involved on both sides, from the promoter and from the artist. So you always come from a place of clarity and not conflict. And I think everybody then would win in that case. And that is where I ended. And then the other thing I wanted to add is that you'll be very surprised how templates for everything are on the internet. So if maybe you're not in a position where you can afford a lawyer or somebody, you can literally find a basic template of a contract and what should go into it, as long as you've got some form of paperwork. Because I know as artists, people aren't, at the same level financially. They can't afford, the fees, consulting a lawyer and all of that. But there are legal templates that you can find on the internet. And I think that concludes the formal part of the presentation. And then I'd just like us to go through, just for interest's sake and to see what people's thoughts are. There's a case study that I found that I thought would be interesting for us to discuss. An artist is a DJ, South African DJ once again, called Kelvin Momo, was booked in Australia. And a lot of things happened. I think we would have to go through the case study for us to actually see where the problem was. But the headline is that now the promoter is suing him to recoup his costs because the shows didn't happen because of certain things that are in the story. So I'd like us to maybe go through. I'm a very fast reader, so I'll be able to go through everything, and then I'm interested to hear what you guys think, what everybody's comments are. Okay. So basically, he's a very well-known musician in this country. He's an amapiano artist, DJ, who was booked to perform in Australia. And in summary, I think you guys can maybe read it later. I don't want to take too much time. Him and his manager didn't show up. And because I had read the article before, the promoter really tried to accommodate them. He changed flights because they couldn't make this flight. I think he rebooked the flights more than once. And they just basically didn't pitch. And it was a multiple city kind of performance. It wasn't just one place in Australia. It was a couple of places. And now he tried to reasonably, obviously the next step would then be sending a letter of demand to say, you owe me this because you didn't meet the expectations of ABC. And they just ghosted him. They were not responding. And now he's trying to sue the company, the Kelvin Momo's actual company, to recoup his costs, reputational damage, and all of those things. So that is the summary of the case study. So I'm interested to just hear what everybody's opinion would be on the issue. And this happened recently. The article came out recently. I think it was in May.
So no comments? I mean, we had something similar in Trinidad, but let's hear Ronnie. Ronnie, go ahead.
Okay, good evening. Once again, I think the issue is I was talking to Mama Unathi yesterday after the session that a lot of people they take this webinar or the workshops lightly, because if you have attended, you'll understand what's going on. Education is very important in this industry because everything you need to apply it, you need to know, and then you apply it. So I think the guy was misled somehow because you can't name when the company invited you and then you said it's a tour, you're gonna be going to different places. You've got fans or supporters, people who are buying your music, people who are going all out to make sure that you've got a bread on the table, you feed your family, you clothe them, you put a roof under their head. So these people, I think if we can, because here in South Africa, we always push this thing of guys, we need to attend these workshops, and most of the time these workshops are free. These workshops, people, they go all out and says we're gonna do it for free so that we can educate you, and then you know what's going on. Unlike in the past, let me say 20 years back, like our fathers, our grandfathers, they didn't know about this. They didn't know. They just like love to sing. So in the case of Calvin Momo, I think he was misled. The group, Mama Unati, she said something when she was talking about riders, that you find that when the organizer or the event organizer calls and asks, how many people are you bringing? And then they'll be like, we are 10. And then these people, they are not doing anything. So it's very, very important to have the circle of people that will help you to understand the job that you are doing, because this is work. It's not just like you're entertaining people, it's work. That's why Mama Unati, every time when she speaks, she says, you must have this thing, you must run it as a business, not just an entertainment, but you must run it as a business. So the guy, he needs to go back to a drawing board and have people in his cycle that will help him to make the brand go as far as it could. So that's my 2 cents on the issue of Kelvin Momo. That education is very important. I think, and I wish there were upcoming artists here who will learn that these things, you're not just doing it for entertainment, but it's a business. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Unathi, I have a question because I didn't get to read the case, but was any reason given for the no-show at all? Or did he simply not show up?
I think they just kept coming up with excuses, because the first time they had a kind of a clause in their performance contract, because I'm seeing a paragraph here. In terms of the agreement, Buchire stated that Kelvin Momo was supposed to do a live performance in Melbourne on November 2 for 60 minutes, and then in Perth on November 3 last year for the same duration. They also agreed that if he failed to show up, they would reschedule for him to go and perform within 3 months of any postponement and or cancellation. So on his part, the promoter had made, like, there was a risk management clause there. And then if he was unable to perform and failed to reschedule, a mutually agreeable date to perform would and fail to reschedule a mutually agreeable date to perform, he would then immediately refund the promoter. So the contract, the terms are very clear. Like, if you can't make it, we can reschedule within 3 months of the postponement. If you're unable to perform or you can't reschedule, you have to pay me back my money. So that was clear in the contract. So they paid him 50% deposit and agreed to pay him the remainder 7 days prior to the carnivals. But he didn't pitch for any of the events. They failed to board the flights that had been arranged for them. And it occurred not once, not twice, but 3 times. So the promoter rebooked the flights 3 times and he still didn't rock up. And on each occasion, despite failing to board the rescheduled flight, the artist and the artist manager assured the promoter upon being contacted that they fully intend to perform. So they didn't give excuses. They just kept saying, please reschedule, we were coming, as far as the article is concerned.
On the basis of what I've been told, if I were the promoter, I would sue them as well. Thus far, we've focused on where the promoter screws the artist over. But on the other side, and I think it's correct, there's a real reputational issue for the promoter. You go not just a financial issue, but a reputational one. There's an ongoing situation now in Trinidad. And actually, I would speak to what's happening in Trinidad and Barbados, where an extremely popular artist has been doing shows around the region. In the first instance, he did a show in Barbados. Tickets in Barbados were selling for as much or more than $500. So those were the highest tier tickets. I think there may have been some like for cabanas, but essentially you were paying as much as $500 for a ticket. And he came But the show was organized in such a way that there were many other acts performing, but the main act didn't go on until extremely late. So let's say he went on just before 3 a.m. when the police had said that the show had to finish by 3. So they allowed him to perform, but he only performed for 25 minutes. And I wasn't there, but for me, first of all, if I'm a promoter and that guy is rumored to have been paid $500,000, if I paid an artist $500,000, certainly I want more than 25 minutes worth of performance. Secondly, if I'm an audience member and I paid up to $500 for a ticket, I would have an issue as well with 25 minutes performance. Again, I considered, well, what does this mean reputationally for the promoter? I'm not sure it affected the artist much, but certainly the promoter, I would be very skeptical where the promoter is concerned. The artist was then later booked to perform in Trinidad. I don't know all the details, but he didn't perform, and his reason was to do with not being paid what he was supposed to be paid. So the show went on, but without the artist, without the featured artist. And this is not necessarily an unusual situation in the region. There was another show, and this one happens often. There's a featured artist. You go to the show and then there's an announcement that the artist was ill or missed their flight or some reason is given. But after you've paid your ticket, you're paid for your ticket, gone to the show, the artist you've gone to see is a no-show. And this is almost normalized practice in the region. I don't know if there are any comments on the case study and the scenarios I've pointed out for the region. Anyone has anything to add?
In the case with the South African, the term liquidation song, a lot more than just suing. God forgive me, is not my total feel, but I don't think they were wrong, especially if the 3 month has passed where the second arrangement should have been made. In relation to the other thing, locally, I I, I kind of relate a lot of this business thing to how we see each other, how we feel about each other, how we respect each other. Because business, as is being said here, I see in the presentation there, the contract is the shield. So if you're gonna befriend the person with full intention not to have contracts done because you know that you want to be devious, then that's downright wrong and nasty. Yes, things will go wrong, but obviously, if as you correctly said, if you pay a man 500,000+ US, you want more than 20 minutes. So it's come down to me, the organizational structure and how we view each other in every sphere of this particular business, given the fact that things can and will happen at any given unwanted, unknown time.
Thanks, O'Neill. Any other comments, Unathi? This type of situations I've outlined for the region. Are these also common in your environment?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Or do you have similar scenarios in your environment?
Do we have similar scenarios in our environment?
Yes, where, for example, the artist is promoted and then there are no shows and excuses are given at the event to the audience,
It
or
happens all the time. That's why all the case studies are from here. Even the responses from the public when this article came out was that the promoter didn't do his research, because if he had done so, he would know that the guy has a history of not showing up, even locally. So it's a thing here, actually, especially with these new genre artists, Amapiano, with the DJs. People that do kind of adult contemporary music respect their brands, respect promoters. It happens with the younger artists quite a lot, actually. They double book themselves. It's because there's no recourse. That's why, people were happy that this Australian promoter was now willing to take it that far, because they literally do it all the time and get away with it.
Okay, all right. Any other comments? Please note I've launched a survey which you're asked to respond to. It will help us, in the future. So please respond. Okay. So any other comments? Unathi, anything else you want to add? Any questions the audience may have that on issues not addressed that they think might be pertinent?
I think I've basically covered what I, think would be critical. If there's anything else, somebody can say so. But what I would also just, as a parting shot add is that you need to just do research. A lot of the information that we think we don't know, you can find by basically just searching on the internet.
Informative session from all angles. Totally honest.
All right. Well, if there are no more comments, I'm still waiting for you to complete the survey. Please, it's only 4 questions. Unathi, I want to say thank you so much. I learned a lot. I really appreciated how, you broke it down so that it's easily understandable. I want to once again thank the IKS team for identifying you as the facilitator and really making this happen. And I want to thank the participants. Many of them returned for the second day. I think that said a lot on a Saturday morning in Barbados. So I know that alone speaks to how valuable they found it. And I hope that you're able to apply some of the knowledge in practice. I know we spoke about the realities we face. But as I also stated, I think one step at a time, we must work together to try to build industry standards. So thank you very, very much. We have some more webinars coming up. We, as I said, will reopen the link on Monday. So we closed it off for today's session. But we will reopen on Monday for the upcoming webinars. And of course, we have another one today. Unathi, if you're interested, you can attend. It's with Ghanaian social media influencer Wodemaya. Anyone on this session who didn't sign up for that, but who is interested, please send me an email directly, Erica, ERICA at COSCAP, COSCAP.org, and I will send you a registration link. So thank you very much. I'm closing the poll now. And Unathi, I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.